Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to build Nosferatu or Count Orlok with a 1D&D rule set. We want to focus on the concept of his control over his minions. He has bats, rats, and wolves, and as well as people to just kind of do what he does, and that's what we want to do with this build. So, let's get into it. To start the build off, we're going to be using standard array, and our stats are going to look a little something like this. There we go. This, right here. Our 8 is going into strength, our 13 into dexterity. We're putting our 14 in constitution with a +2 to get it to 16. Our 10 is going into intelligence, 12 into wisdom, and 15 with a +1 going into charisma. Get it all 16. Next, for species, we're taking Dampier for pretty obvious reasons. It's not the most optimal, and we're rarely going to be using his bite. What do you want from me, man? Flavor is flavor. For origin feat, we're taking Magic Initiate Cleric. We're going to take Spare the Dying and Thaumaturgy for cantrips. Then we're putting our level 1 spell as Inflict Wounds. As written, we can still use our Charisma as the ability modifier for Inflict Wounds. Spicy. Obviously, this is assuming your DM is letting you customize your background, which, let's be honest, at this point, there's no reason for that not to be the case. Like, brother, I have this conversation so often it drives me insane. If they don't let you, I honestly don't think there's much else in this book to take. Try and work with your DM, and if they won't work with you, man, I'd kind of consider asking myself why you're playing the game with them. D&D is about collaborative storytelling and letting you pick your player options to realize your character and their story. It's kind of the point of the game, and they talk about that in the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. They've pushed this narrative of like, this is your game, this is your story. Do what you got to do to tell it. I mean, there are, of course, some things players try to do that are just blatantly unreasonable, but not allowing you to distribute your +1, your +2 into your ability scores and choose the origin feat you want and the skills that you want to start with and the tool proficiency, that's kind of lame. But I digress. Maybe just go human instead, and you can take the healer hermit background for your healer origin feat. You get the extra origin feat from human to pick Magic Initiate. If you can, get animal handling and arcana to just kind of reference your power over animals and your dabbling in dark magic like he does in the movies. So for our level 1 class, speaking of black magic, we're going Warlock. Pick up Intimidation and Persuasion for skills. I'm gonna take Chill Touch and Toll the Dead as cantrips, and Witch Bolt for the level 1 spell. For our invocation, we're taking Pact of the Chain, our first minion. And the new rules with Pact of the Chain, you can pick a skeleton, which is what we're gonna do. I think it's worth asking your DM if you can flavor it as a person, kind of like a pseudo spawn thrall type thing, like what's his face from the movie. It's understandable if the DM doesn't want to let you do this, though. Having a familiar that can just walk around town all willy-nilly into shops and not raise awareness, not raise suspicion, it's a little out there. So the playstyle of our build is actually activated kind of now. We can cast all of our touch range spells through the skeleton at the cost of its reaction. Chill Touch and Inflict Wound. Chill Touch and Inflict Wounds so far. I would like to point out that in 2024, casting 2 spells using a spell slot on the same turn is a no-go. But we can technically cast Hex, then use Inflict Wounds, because Inflict Wounds through Magic Initiate isn't using a spell slot. But Unfortunately, inflict wounds doesn't proc hex damage because it's not an attack roll anymore. It very much seems like they went out of their way to 86 level 1 attack roll spells with the touch range. I don't know. I guess hitting a boss with 2d10 damage at plus 1d6 at level 1 from at least 30 feet away, it's a little bit intense. It is important to note that the wording of this specifically is when you cast a spell with the range of touch, your familiar can deliver that said touch. This is very important for later, but keep it in mind. It's very similar to like the Echo Knight's Echoes. They themselves are not the ones making the attack. You are making the attack from their position. Level 2 to 4, we're going to be taking a massive detour into Ranger. Hear me out. First of all, it gives us proficiency with medium armor, which does help us a lot. We can do a lot from a distance, sure, but we are going to be getting up close and personal very, very soon. You can get away with using weapons for your mastery. Something like a quarterstaff with Shillelagh and Topple is pretty useful, and in a way, the quarterstaff does fit the flavor. Take expertise in animal handling, and for languages, probably something exotic like Infernal or Abyssal. Again, the black magic vibe. For fighting style, I'd probably just choose defense. We're not really leaning heavy into weapons. If you want to use the Shillelagh thing, you have to take Druidic Warrior through the Druid spell list. For spells, I do stuff like Fog Cloud, Ensnaring Strike, Speak with Animals, just horror, vampire, animal lord stuff. Side note, real quick, you could take blind fighting style and do some interesting things with Fog Cloud, which just kind of fit that vibe of like the horror movie villain coming after you in the fog and out of nowhere. He can see you, but you can't see him. Cool stuff. For our subclass, we're going to take Swarm Keeper, and we're going to flavor this as rats, and this is going to be our second minion vibe. This is where the thing I talked about earlier of where you are casting the spell, not your familiar, comes into play. The Worthing of Gathered Swarm is once on each of your turns, you can cause the swarm to assist you in one of the following ways immediately after hitting a creature with an attack. A spell attack does count as an attack. So again, this doesn't proc with inflict wounds, but it does proc with chill touch being casted by your skeleton. You can move them if they fail a strength save. You can move yourself 5 feet, or you can just do the extra 1d6 piercing damage. Now, obviously, if our skeleton casts chill touch and it procs our swarm, we cannot use our swarm to move our familiar, but we can still use it to move ourselves, even though our skeleton casted the spell way over there. The skeleton delivered the spell way over there. From here, we go back into Warlock into level 3. We pick up some more invocations, namely Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast, both applied to Chill Touch for pretty obvious reasons. You getting a pretty good idea of what we're doing here. We also get our first second level spell slot, and we're picking up our third minion, Cloud of Daggers. We're going to be flavoring it as bats. A cloud of bats, a swarm of bats, whatever you want to say. Our in-combat playstyle is that we're going to be casting Cloud of Daggers, and we're going to use the force movement from our swarm as well as the repelling blast, chill touch, to push enemies into it. Made much easier since we can cast it from our position or from the position of the skeleton. So we can maneuver the skeleton, and we can just kind of ping pong them around through or into the Cloud of Daggers spot. For this build, for again obvious reasons, I'm picking up Undead Warlock as a subclass. We get some cool stuff. We can add necrotic damage. We're harder to kill, etc., etc. Next, we are diving 6 levels deep into Sorcerer, specifically Shadow Sorcerer, to get our next minion or minions. the Hound of Ill-Omen. We can now, as a bonus action, spend 3 sorcery points to summon a dire wolf. We pinpoint a target, the wolf moves and attacks the target. It stays summoned for 1 minute until its HP is 0 or until the target's HP is 0. Other than running out of sorcery points, there's no limit to how many hounds we can summon in a day, in a combat encounter, or even how many can be summoned at one time. Also, note, when they're within 5 feet of an enemy, that enemy has disadvantage on saving throws against your spells. Now, I am not 100% clear on whether or not Repelling Blast would count on this or not. For example, I know if you hit with the spell and use Gathering Swarm to apply the force movement, it's your swarm doing it, not your spell, so they don't get disadvantage against a strength saving throw. But I don't really know if it counts. I don't really understand the intention behind the invocation, whether the invocation is doing the force movement or if the invocation is adding an effect onto the spell for the force movement. So it's just kind of talk to your DM about the interpretation of that and just kind of let them figure that out. The spells we take as we level for sorcerer are pretty inconsequential. Take whatever you feel you need. There's plenty that match the flavor, but don't add to the concept of our playstyle all that much. Main thing to note in these 6 levels is that Sorcerer 4, we are taking Sentinel. This allows us to make an opportunity attack against a creature who disengages within 5 feet of us or attacks an ally within 5 feet of us. And if we hit them, their speed is reduced to 0. The concept here is to trap them in the Cloud of Daggers. Quick side note, sometimes it may be useful to use the sorcery points to cycle out enemies from the Cloud of Daggers. If the stars align, we could cast Chill Touch on the creature in the cloud to knock it out again, then Quicken Spell to cast Chill Touch again from our skeleton, knocking a new creature into it. Again, it depends on the situation, but these are combos that are important to keep in mind just so we can have them in our repertoire. From here, it's really up to you how you want to finish the build. You could take one last level in Ranger for another ASI or feat, and then finish off Ranger 4, Sorcerer 6, Warlock 10, but it may be more worth it to forego the ASI from Ranger and take Warlock 11 to get the Mystic Arcanum. Keep an eye on Warcaster as well. Getting advantage on concentration rolls to keep up the cloud is very much going to be useful, as well as being able to sub out your opportunity attacks to cast spells, meaning you can use Chill Touch for more shenanigans outside of your turn. It also procs with the first part of Sentinel, as in if an enemy within 5 feet of you makes an attack against an ally or disengages, you get to do an opportunity attack, and you can sub that opportunity attack out for spellcasting instead. But it does not count as an opportunity attack. You are specifically substituting the opportunity attack to cast a spell. What that means is that when it hits, it doesn't make their speed 0. So do keep that in mind. So really, man, that's the build. You're very much a melee spell-focused battlefield controller, utilizing some rules as written shenanigans to slap enemies around the map using your own hand or the hand of your familiar. And you're flooding the board with bats, rats, wolves, and skeletons, just like he kind of does in the movie. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.